To another Conversations in History. We are talking with Rick Deblasio, who is the longtime coach at East Grand Rapids and a member of the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association Hall of Fame. First of all, congratulations on the honor. You've been inducted. You've been in there a while, but we just are doing interviews, and I just wanted to say hello, and I appreciate talking to you.
Greg, it's great to be with you.
I guess the easiest place to start, Rick, is really start from the beginning. You guys have a different road. We've already had a chance to interview Adam Vincent, who you coached with for a long time, and you guys had a different road to the success that you've had. Maybe we'll start with you. Where did lacrosse start for you?
Well, I grew up in suburbs of Pittsburgh and played football all my young adult life. Went to college in Cleveland, played some more football. Never heard of lacrosse, never understood it. We moved around a while, ended up Grand Rapids when our kids were quite young, settled on the East Grand Rapids School District for many reasons attributable to academics, not athletics. Discovered that the district is pretty proficient in developing athletic teams. I started coaching rocket football, thinking, that was my path for me and my son when he was in about the fourth grade. And I tell this story occasionally. All I ever wanted was to be the 78er football coach. And I figured I could work with my son a couple more years, and then he'd move on, and I'd continue to coach young kids as they came up. And for all kinds of different reasons, I didn't get selected to be the 78er football coach. If I had, who knows, maybe none of this conversation would be meaningful, because I may never have gone the alternative, which was, hey, Rick, we're going to start middle school lacrosse at the sixth grade level. We're currently at eighth grade. We need coaches. We're looking for guys who played some college athletics, guys we know. Adam Vincent is the X and O guy. You need to kind of organize it, schedule, transportation with the kids. And, at first it was quite, daunting for me to even consider it. I couldn't spell lacrosse in those days and misspelled it quite often, actually. But I took on that role and enjoyed it quite a bit, enjoyed the sport a lot. Adam and I were actually working together, I think, a few years later. He joined Wolverine Worldwide, where I was an executive. But we had become close. He spent a couple years with us, and then he moved on to the high school as a freshman coach, then JV coach, and then eventually an assistant varsity coach. And I, for some reason, just kept getting moved up. Didn't understand why. My son was an eighth grader, prepared to say goodbye again, maybe continue to coach, maybe not. Then I got a call, hey, would you coach the freshman team? And I said, sure. And after that season, hey, would you coach the JV team? Sure. And then we had 125 kids playing lacrosse at the high school. And this would be, the season would have been 2001, spring 2001. We ended up with a varsity A team, a varsity B team, JVs and freshmen. I was asked to coach the varsity B team, considered a number of juniors, but mostly sophomores and a couple freshmen. And again, I'm thinking I'm at the end of the rope, enjoying the game quite a bit. We had an East Grand Rapids kid who played at Johns Hopkins, Greg Hennis, who was our varsity coach, very good kid. And we had Adam now working his way to varsity, and we had another fellow from the local area coaching. But Greg left suddenly at the end of the 2000 season. Dan Wood took over, Adam is number two guy, me coaching the B varsity. And at the end of 1 year, Dan Wood decided to leave, and that left us without a varsity coach. Left only Adam as a reasonable candidate because of him being associated with a varsity team. We had gone through some transitions. I and Adam, we sat together and said, look, let's put a plan together. I'll be the head coach, if that's okay with you, Adam, for about 3 years. and then you'll take over the program, and we plan to carry this on for an unlimited period of time. And we went to the lacrosse board, which was a little skeptical about me for sure, but they accepted our proposal, and that's how Adam and I got started leading East Grand Rapids lacrosse in the spring of 2002.
Let me take you, before we get into the Grand Rapids story with you guys, let me take you back to Cleveland. Where'd you go to school?
Went to school at John Carroll University, Jesuit University, Division III. I had some looks at some Division I opportunities, but I felt I wanted to play more than just be that guy on that team, so I elected to go to John Carroll. I also, at that time, Vietnam was building, and I had believed I had a sense of responsibility, wanted to go into the Marine Corps. At one point in time, planned to go after high school, 1967. And my dad, who was a World War II veteran with a Bronze Star, a sergeant, said, "Rick, the war's going to go on. You'll be a lot happier as an officer. I know you. Go to school, get your degree, and then go." So I went to school, entered a Marine Corps program called Platoon Leaders Class, spent a couple summers at Quantico, Virginia with others similar motivated, finished a summer camp before my senior year, had the option of taking my commission or not. And when spring came around of 1971, I elected to become a Marine second lieutenant. I also got married to Marlene, and we're now celebrating 49 years together.
Wow.
And at one point in time, we got engaged in January, and around Thanksgiving Day, parade in downtown, we're together, and we ran into the Marine recruiters who were working on me. And she kind of surprised me by saying, "You know, Rick, if you decide to go in the Marine Corps, I don't think we should get married just yet." And I'm like, "Wow, holy cow, that's something." So we kind of worked our way through it. I went on active duty in September of 1971. And it's about a 5-month program where second lieutenants who have their commissions now really learn how to be a Marine, how to be an officer. And by the time I finished in March, we were not sending any more Marine officers to Vietnam en masse. So I didn't go to Vietnam, ended up as a tank platoon commander, went out to the 3rd Marine Division in Camp Pendleton. And I no sooner showed up at the battalion headquarters, and the chief administrative officer, a warrant officer, apparently coached the division football team, and he was very interested in me playing football for the 1st Tank Battalion Marines, which I did, enjoyed it quite a bit. From there, spent a year with the Navy during the Mideast War of 1973. Was deployed, was on a Navy vessel as a Marine liaison officer, ended up in the Suez Canal when we cleared all the mines out in spring of 74, and then came home and was discharged in September of 1974.
Roughly 4 years, 3.5 years?
3 years.
3
years commitment, yeah.
Tank commander, how does that come out?
Well, you know me, you know, I don't like to walk.
Right.
I did a lot of running as a Marine. I'm very proud. I actually got myself 11 miles down the road one particular day, but I don't like to walk. So I had to be in the top 10% of a 230-man Marine class in order to get that. It was a very favorable billet to get, and I was lucky enough to get to become a tank platoon commander. And like I said, I had my own Jeep as a second lieutenant. We had captains in the Marine Corps that didn't have Jeeps, and so that was my motivation.
I think determination and sort of pursuit are your strengths, to say the least. But my question is, did the Marines help hone that a little bit?
I think the Marines helped build some confidence. The Marines do a lot of peer ranking, and it happened in the basic school when I was actually an officer, 230 young Marine, mostly college graduates. some NCOs that had gone that way. We had been rated as PLCs 2 summers, and I was never the most athletic Marine. I was never the guy that made the longest long jump. I was one of the strongest when it came to some of the physical fitness, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups. But I always was ranked very high by my peers in terms of leadership, people they trusted. And I think that more than anything reinforced my belief in myself that some of my inclinations were pretty much okay. The way I treated people, approached people. There's no questions that the Marines do a very good job of trying, and maybe not as successfully with officers with educational backgrounds, family backgrounds, but the Marine Corps is about taking you down to a bare minimum and building you back in their image. And one of the things that I give the Marine Corps credit for is that they understand in battle situation, young second lieutenants, 23 years old, 24 years old, are going to be forced to make critical life and death decisions. So along the way, in the barracks environment, in the training field environment, in the field exercise environment, in the total operation of the Marine Corps, they let us, as young officers, make big decisions and supported us when we made them, even if they proved certainly not to be optimum, but to be safe, to be okay.
Right.
And I think I learned along the way that I needed to develop my teams, my kids, my workforce development as I became a company executive, the group leadership, to say, hey, I trust you. Here, let's talk about the parameters. Let's make sure resources are available. Now it's on you. And I'm here, but.
Did that early lesson of not learning to micromanage, was that a valuable lesson, I would think?
Yeah, I think the more you want to accomplish and the more variables come into whatever you're doing, whether it's a business assignment or in our case, and talking about the wonderful sport of lacrosse. I mean, Adam and I always look at each other when we have our drinks, out of season, talking, reminiscing sometimes. There are 100 little things that most of which have to come together to be playing the last Saturday in June of the season. And we've been blessed with doing that fairly regularly. And I think more than anything, it's testimony to our commitment to those 100 kinds of things that we pay a lot of attention to. And a portion of it is execution, it's strategy for sure. It's getting kids available to play position, be able to have those skills. But there are so many other things that come. And at East Grand Rapids, we talk, and I hate to use this phrase because we're listening to it all over the news, but the quid pro quo. And I ask my kids all the time, especially newer groups, what does that mean to you? And they'll look at me and normally they'll say, well, it's this for that. And I said, so here's the this. The this is we provide an environment for you. We provide safe practice conditions. We provide good facilities, good equipment. We think we provide a fairly nuanced approach. We organize our routines to be effective. So that's the this. The that is when the whistle blows, you're on the inside of the lines and we're on the outside of the lines. So you take care of business when you're inside the lines, and we'll take care of business when we're with you inside those lines or whatever. And I think more than anything over the years, I think that has enabled us. You've had a chance to read our, back in the early 2000s, 1996, 98, Adam and I put together a philosophy. And we've never wavered from that philosophy. And it's about treating our players as young adults, not as kids, giving them the respect as they as they have earned as young adults, but also providing the expectation that a young adult should manifest in that environment. So we looked at team captains to make decisions with us. We looked team captains to talk about lineups and who plays and when. We talk about changes in strategy and what works. We make it effectively a conversation among several players and several coaches. Ultimately, I make the decision, animated decision, but we do it in a way that we kind of keep ourselves very serious of our purpose, but we don't take ourselves and we don't let others take us too seriously.
Was Dad a disciplinarian? I'm curious.
You know, my dad was a doctor, surgeon, World War II. You know, we think about our lives today. Yeah, I went away as a Marine. Yes, I spent several months away from my family. You know, my dad graduated from medical school, signed up for the Army Medical Corps. He was gone 3 years, man.
Okay.
3 years.
Okay.
He ended up with Patton. I mean, he was at the Battle of the Bulge. He was at the liberation of the prisoner the tank. You know, the Jewish camps. So, you know, but he was a guy that just commanded respect. When he stood in the room, there was no question he was in the room. And my mother probably was the more, hey, buddy, this is the way it is. You know, this is the time for this. This is the time for that. And, you know, we had kind of a different relationship in that I had a month off. I was gone for most of the summer because I was in the Marines for 6 weeks. And then I went back to Carroll to go to summer school because I wanted to graduate on time and I didn't want to take a heavy load. And it got to the point where my idea of a lifestyle as a young adult, 19, 20, 21 years old, didn't match with hers. And I can remember.
Imagine that.
I'd come back from the Marines, you know, get to the bus station in Pittsburgh. My dad would pick me up. We'd be heading back to the house, and he would say, literally, what's your plan, Rick? And I would look at him, and I said, well, you know, Mom, I think it's probably better if I just go back to school and take a summer class. I have a job in Cleveland. I'll work in Cleveland. He said, yeah, I think that's the right thing to do. At Christmas, I was off for a month. As soon as New Year's Day was over, I'd come down from the upstairs. On the staircase would be all my clothes folded, ready to be packed. And my mother would basically suggest, Rick, it's time for you to go back to school. I still had 3 weeks off. So, yeah, but, you know, as I got older, got married, my mother and I obviously became very close.
Connection between Patton and the tanks. I know you talked about wanting to be a tank guy because you didn't have to run, but was there some influence from Dad being a part of the George Patton deal?
Yeah, I'm sure there was. I mean, I guess I endorsed the power. I endorsed, you know, the whole thing about tanks. I also liked the fact that in an infantry company, I'm responsible for, I forget exactly now, but around 25 to 28 young Marine lives. And I've got an infrastructure of a platoon sergeant and squad leaders and what have you. You put me in a tank battalion. Now I'm a tank platoon commander. I've got 5 tanks with 5 crew each, so I've got 25 guys. I've got a communications guy, and I've got some mechanics and that stuff. And I've got, you know, probably $30 million in those days of assets in my tanks, 90 millimeter cannon. The thought that just the scale of being responsible for that kind of organization appealed to me.
We talk
as a young 24-year-old.
We talk a little bit about lacrosse guys talk about Long Island attacks and, upstate New York. The grit of West Pennsylvania is obvious to anybody that's been around athletics. Did that have an influence on you growing up?
I think I recognize that a lot of great football players came out of Western Pennsylvania and continue to come out of Western Pennsylvania. Diehard Steeler fan. My dad and I would go to 3 or 4 games a year, mostly to see the Dallas All-Stars in town, never to really watch the Steelers back in those days when I was a kid. So I think there was some association with that, but I never really thought myself as a great athlete. I thought of myself, and I think I'd been characterized by my coaches mostly as a hard worker, a guy that spends his time in a weight room. Typically, when I was a younger guy, one of the most strongest guys on the team. Always knew my responsibilities, my offense, never the fastest. And I think that there's no question that Western Pennsylvania gave me I grew up in an environment where going on to play athletics was not unusual or something that surprised everybody.
Talk a little bit about corporate life. I mean, I know you got married, you come out of the Marines, and then you sort of
started. Well, yeah, I initially wanted to be so when I was at John Carroll, I was an economics major, and one of the courses that infatuated me the most was labor economics. I grew up, in Pittsburgh, surrounded by steel mills. I had members of the family working in those steel mills. And, I was intrigued by the environment between labor and management. And in those days, it was pretty difficult, pretty challenging. And when I was in the Marine Corps, I thought about going to law school. I took the LSATs aboard the ship, sitting in the captain's cabin. And I didn't do very well. Still don't do very well on program tests. I had an interview at the University of Pittsburgh because one of my uncle knew the assistant dean in the law school. And I went for the meeting, and the guy looked at my credentials, and he said, Rick, he said, you've got some background. He said, you may very well be the next F. Lee Bailey. I don't know if that name means anything, but he was But he said, there's virtually no chance that's going to happen because there's not a law school in the country that's going to admit you. So you can go back and maybe take some courses or whatever. So with that in mind, I ended up taking a job as a labor relations counselor with a big steel mill. And we had, I don't know, we must have had 12,000 U.S. steel workers. I was responsible for about a third of those, and really got into the nitty gritty of, what happens on the factory floor and the relationship between supervision. And there were a lot of them going through strikes and some of the violence associated with those. But one of the biggest takeaways I got is that management very seldom tells you the truth about the incident that happened on the floor. The supervisors especially are very reluctant to be honest. Their bosses tend to back them up. They come to me and say, Rick, come on, listen to this. We got to fire this guy. And then when I was younger, into that, we'd fire him. And then we go through a grievance process. Well, then the union representatives would come see me. And they'd say, hey, Rick, this is what really, do you know this is what really happened? And I found that the most unreliable source of information came from those directly responsible to provide that information. And I think that got me to go, and I was in an office, everybody drove up to see me, the superintendents who worked in these mills, he'd get in his car. It's a mill that was, 10 city blocks. And I decided, screw that. I'm going to go see them. I was the only guy in my office. In fact, my peers were very upset with me because they didn't want to do that. They were comfortable with. I said, no, no. So I'd get down and knock on the superintendent's office, they all knew me. Rick, what are you doing here? I said, well, we got this grievance, you want to fire this guy. I said, I guess I'd like to kind of get a closer look at what really happened. Well, you have statements. Yeah, I know I have statements. I'd like to interview a couple guys, like the supervisor. I'd like to interview him. I'd like to interview the guy, So I would do that, and over time I developed a perspective that, hey, things aren't always what they appear to be. And I think throughout my life and my work, my consulting business, my engagement in China, Europe, South America, all over the world, I've always gone in with a little bit of skepticism that no matter what I hear, no matter how, assertive someone is about it, there's a pretty good chance it may be mostly true, it may be partly true, or it could be not true at all. And I think it serves me well to get to the bottom or get to a quicker decision-making perspective, because I have a little bit of built-in skepticism. Not that I, don't respect the chain of command, not that I cast aspersions on supervisors or lacrosse coaches or administrators. It's just that, let's make sure it is what it is. And if it is what it is, the approach to fix it will be probably evident to all of us once we get to that point. I think that's probably been the biggest thing. And in that quest for information, I've kind of learned that if you control the numbers, knowledge of the numbers or knowledge of the facts, you're generally, 3 steps ahead of everybody. It's one of the reasons in China, we're probably one of the most analytic teams in the state, if not in the Midwest. We have stats, and you've been to some of the meetings where we're talking about some of end of season honors, and I'm talking about, how many takeaways and how many this and how many that. And we're hearing about, well, these kids, they don't have parents, they don't have that. Well, I don't know how you for me, without knowing that there are 20 objectives, we call them goals, team goals, takeoff winning percentages, wing ground balls, man up offensive performance, shots per game, shots on goal per game, goals per game, goals off of man up, goals given up per game, goals in transition, goals lost in we just map all that out. And from that, we get a pretty good view. And I can take those charts and those numbers for the 7 state championships I've been involved in, and the 11 or 8 or 9 overall with between Adam and me. And I can show you those numbers and average the ones when we won state champions and show you the ones when we didn't. And you'll see diversity, and you'll see the categories of performance. And that's a big part of what we do. I don't argue with kids about playing better. I argue with kids about shooting better, argue with kids about, percent of shots on goal, argue with ground balls, argue with clear passes, things that you don't argue about, you discuss and coach about.
Analytics, we just got Huddle's assist as part of the program. We compared it from last year when we didn't. We had parents taking stats to what we did. And we were probably 15, 17% off. That's a lot statistically. And in terms of assists and goals and, what we thought was one and something else. And I'm not saying Huddle's 100% right, but it does change your process. And other places I've coached, we've always had those sort of analytics. And our first year at Skyline, it wasn't the case. My point is analytics are important. So kind of one of the conversations that I had with Adam is you guys approach this whole Grand Rapids process with sort of business model ideas and paradigms, and kind of talk about that, because it wasn't typical of what I think other guys do, because like a lot of people, you've got to come with what your strength is.
Well, yeah, let me go back. So we've been taking detailed stats for as long as I've been coaching, Again, we developed team goals way back, thinking that that would help us communicate. We post those. We post lineup sheets. We post practice schedules every day before practice. We communicate probably over, and I think that's part of a business strategy, is just making sure if there are questions about whatever, we get those in time, or we can deal with them before practice or pre-game. Obviously, there's less opportunity to be talking. We did both huddle assist and manual stats last year. It was our first year with huddle assist. I will agree with you, or agree with anyone, that huddle assist is not 100%, partly because we wear jerseys and weather conditions that make number distinction harder for those logarithms.
Absolutely.
So, but at the end of the season, I concluded that huddle assist, and with my ability to break down the film and validate where I think there is a problem. So I don't have to look at the entire film, but I can look. And parents keeping a few categories that aren't in the huddle package. We're going to go forward with that this year. And I'll work very hard to make sure that our stats for end of season consideration are worthy of consideration and not bogus. I get comments from parents because we post them, we send them out. Oh, the goalie had more saves. My son, he had more saves. Well, if the ball hits the pipe, it's not a save. It's got to be a ball that's going to go in the cage. If he saves that, then it's a save. If the pipe helps him, it's not a save.
Right.
But in terms of the business side of things, it's Adam and I have always, and I try to carry on, approached this as a business, not as a cut and dried, ruthless kind of a business, but we realize that in that 100 kinds of things that go on all the time, there is a lot of parallels to us being business guys as well as us being coaches. So when we were together, we didn't have to, explain things much to each other. Oh, we had some differences. I love zone, only play zone. Adam, he's not quite as committed to zone. As you know, when you coached against him, he's played man. Well, in 4 years I've been back as head coach, we've never given up more than an average of 6 goals a game in 4 years, all the way through to the championship. 6 goals a game as the marker against me when the game starts. I give them 6. I can win a lot of those games.
Right. Right.
I can win a lot of those games.
Do you think it's hard to prepare for you because you do play zone and nobody else does? Think that's an advantage?
We've evolved the zone a lot since the early days. What we would always see, because we played a high and low crease, we don't do that anymore. And the teams that played against us would play a 1-4-1. And they put 4 guys across, 2 guys on the crease. And that would create some challenges until we got more comfortable with it, because it affected then slides. Now we don't do that. We play what is called a backer zone, and what our guys are responsible for is about a 3x3 round area of turf. And as they move, we scrape. So they will basically slide with that guy until their adjacent can pick them up for them. And the whole zone rotates basically into the ball movement. And so we've become just a lot better. We've also become more athletic and better stick skills, where we understand this is all going to be all over the state now, Greg. Thanks. By the time we're done here, we also understand we don't protect body. You got to keep yourself square, and yes, you got to be ready for that guy to do his dodge. But we also orient ourselves to stick. So we call it, little I man, big eye ball, and we try to put our little eye on their outside eye, so we're big eye ball side. And that has done, especially in the 2018 campaign, where we went into the end of season as a clear underdog to a fabulous Forest Hill Central team. But yet, when we got into the championship, we were able to hold them, 10 goals, and we were able to do that because we held Bryce Clay to 3 shots, 1 goal. And it's not that, and it's a couple of things. So the zone works for us because it is easier to play. Our defensive players don't necessarily need to be as good as a man player, and it's easier for us to reintroduce that every year. So when you talk about, you've got to have a certain mix of things, we agree that mix, what we would agree is that mix is measured by achievement of statistics. How we get those statistics comes in different forms and formats. In 2017, we were a attack-driven team with the 3 best attack guys as a unit probably in the state, 2 of them probably the top 5 attackmen in the state that year. In 2018, we were a midi-driven team. So we got more shooting and scoring from the midfield, except in the state final where we had an attackman who was a midfielder earlier in the year, put 6 goals on him. When does that happen?
Isn't that typical of most high school teams? And let me follow up with this question. You have had some, with the exception of Rob Ambrose, you've had the most success as a school that I can think of. Certainly Forest Hill Central would be in that same discussion. If you and Adam were coaching at Jenison, would you have the same kind of success, or is it partly because you're fortunate enough to beat East Grand Rapids? And I say that from having coached at St. Mary's and coached at public schools. And at St. Mary's, I get to the state finals because I've got athletes, and I've had good teams, but not near the level that I had at St. Mary's.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer, and it's speculative.
Doesn't take away brilliance.
Well, no. I don't know if brilliance is the right phrase, but
look at the numbers.
Our youth program is smaller than Central's. We are continuing to generate some pretty talented young lacrosse players. But we are a public school, and we are a public school, about 1,000 kids. We have kids with all kinds of diverse interests and opportunities. So we try to keep it simple, and we try to put into place schemes and approaches and an approach to coaching those schemes that make it easier for kids to get it and execute it. So I don't know what would happen at Jenison. Maybe in another couple of years we'll go find out.
Right.
I have a feeling we would be, whatever you want to measure success in that environment, I think our approach would lend itself to helping that program go, just because the whole premise of our approach is to win with what we've got, not win with who we want.
Right. And I think
so we don't have the feeder program that Brother Ice has, Catholic Central, the Detroit area, off-season programs. We don't have the kids going to the Loyolas and going to the High Points and going on Marquettes and going all over. Our kids, a lot of them end up, we had one kid go Division II last year. One kid in 2018 went Division I. a bunch of Division III kids, which we love. We love them all. But we somehow get those kids to be able to play. And it's all about, it's not, there was a quote from one of the hot coaches up in one of the New York schools 2 or 3 years ago. I think he's now, maybe it was Lars. But he said, over 50% of the game is played in unsettled situations.
True.
We tend to practice 80% of our time in settled environments, 6-on-6, man up, man down. We've kind of changed our focus to where we need to win the unsettled environment. So clears, we need to be 90% the ability to clear our ball. Last year, again, we weren't quite as good. We were around 70. The years we win state championships, we're in the 80 plus clears. Rides. We want to get the ball back no less than 25% of the time. We want to be back on offense. 25% of the time, we should be playing defense. We run a 10-man, 2 things that about me that very few teams do in the state, certainly not with our religious commitment. And I don't mean to use the word religious in the wrong sense, but our commitment, and that is our zone defense and our 10-man ride. Who runs 10-man rides? I remember in our championship season, the first game, 2018, Forest Hill Central had 4 empty net goals off our 10-man ride. Did we give it up? Yeah, we gave it up later in that game, but we just made sure we got better at it. We've had situations last season in our home game, regular season game with Forest Hills Eastern. Game was 6-4. 2 of their 4 was open goal shots by their long sticks. Very outstanding long stick. So, we deal with that, but we just persevere. We just figure out how to get better. So we figure that 70% of our goals, our target per game is 16 goals. And our settled offense, we figure they're going to generate 10 of those. All right. And there's it's 30 plus shots. It's, 40 plus shots. It's 50% on cage, and it's 50% made. 10. Very simple math again. We figure we're going to pick up 2 or 3 goals in transition, either through fast break or through turnarounds on our ride. And we're going to pick up a goal or 2 on man up, depending on the situation with penalties, and that gets us to 16. We figure if we can get 16 goals in every game, we're state champions. There's no way you can work with a team that gives up 6 on one side and, we're going to be undefeated? No, maybe not. So it's an approach that focuses on an execution of a plan on both sides of the ball that is mostly executionable by what someone would consider an 8 out of 10 lacrosse player. Not that we don't have 9s and 10s, and we love them. And sometimes we have 5s and 6s, and we love them too. But overall, we feel our approach wins with a range of talent that gives us some margin. And that's how we come back every year, and we don't graduate. I mean, we had a situation last year which was for us disappointing as hell. I mean, we only made it to the semifinals. So, and that for us was like painful, very painful. But, it wasn't on the kids. It was mostly on me for some decisions I made. But those kids will be back, and younger kids will be up.
Talk briefly about coaching your son.
I'm happy to talk about it. Very challenging. I coached him, my son Rick, and 11 of his friends from the 6th grade until they graduated. Most of them, I was their only lacrosse coach. There was a group. Let me turn that off.
Sure.
Call from Werner Melicos.
There was a group that were seniors or juniors when my son was a junior who played on the varsity that year. So my son and I had a deal, and I was hard on him. He was never, he was a little bit like me, was not the most athletic.
You got to sit back a little bit.
Wasn't the most athletic. His junior year, he was about 5'8". Came back as a senior at almost 5'10.5", 5'11". Made a big difference for him playing football. But we always had a deal, and it was like, Dad, don't treat me any different than anybody else. Just treat me like I'm just one of the team. And I think pretty much we did that.
Did you?
Well, I think we did. So when Adam and I put our program together, the lacrosse advisory board, as we call it, was made up at that time of mostly junior parents, a few seniors. So these were parents of players who had played with me from the beginning. And obviously there was some skepticism. We started off that year, 2002, with Birmingham, Cranbrook with Ron Hebert coaching, Brother Rice, and New Trier. 0-4.
I've had that schedule.
0-4.
I've had that schedule. I get it.
And we were up, the last game of that 4 was Brother Rice at Country Day, where they used to play, and we were up at halftime 7-4, 5-3. My kids were so excited to be in that position, they didn't give a crap about the second half. So we ended up losing 11-8 or something, and Rob did his thing, moved some kids from attack. But anyway, we go on spring break. Everybody goes. I don't go on spring break because my son was going off with a group of seniors, and I didn't want him or me to be compromised. So we get back, and there's a board meeting. We go to a board meeting, and the board's ready to fire me. I mean, and it's very, very heated. And they didn't think my son deserved to play, and I was showing him favoritism. And they used some profanity when they referred to my son. And, I was committed to him and the kids, and Adam stepped in and provided, his view of where we were and what was happening and why Ricky played and deserved to play. And it was kind of like, okay, but, we're going to keep an eye on this. Well, we won the next 13 games, lost the game we should have won to the old Lansing Waverly, and then went on to beat Country Day in the tournament for my first championship.
What's your most satisfying? Talk a little bit about legacy and the satisfaction of what East Grand Rapids means to you, and maybe something we don't know that you could share with us.
Well,
looking in.
This is going to sound maybe a little corny, but
No.
we can talk about program history, and we were at a meeting at the Mhslca, and group of administrators and coaches, and they were talking about some future direction of the Mhslca lacrosse program. And they talked about legacy programs, Brother Rice, Catholic Central, East Grand Rapids. I was shocked. I mean, I've never considered ourselves that we're a legacy kind of a program.
not know that you're a legacy program, Rick. Come on. With the success you
I don't. I know, Greg, but I'm a pretty bold guy, but I don't ever take anything for granted.
Okay, that's fair.
So every year for me, it's the journey. It's the journey of that year. So I look at, the years that I've been coaching as a head coach, 7, and as an assistant with Adam for 6. And, we've been to the finals, I don't know, 6 of 7 of those years, and semifinals total 10 of 13. But every one of those is a journey for me. And every one of them kind of starts now. I'm emailing, I'm talking, we're talking about, indoor activities, who's going to do what, who's going to do where. We don't have much engagement with them other than the 4-man rule we try to take advantage of. And then we look at, lifting after school. We do a ton of conditioning. Our kids, one of the 100 things that we talk about is that 3 days a week, our kids run about 1.7 miles before practice, just as a run, all through season. As you know, we do sprints after every game, win or lose. We grab those sprints on the field before. That's a 2. So of 100 things, there's 2. I only need to talk about 98 more.
Right.
But I look at the endurance of our program as what to talk about. And the fact that it has created a perspective about legacy among the community and total statewide is just, every day I hear that, I pinch myself like, really? Oh my God, think about that. And think about our kids who participated and the parents who made all those sacrifices. But you know what I measure, what I do in, and this, you know me, I'm a big, tough guy. I measure what we're doing by the end of season goodbye that finishes with, I love you, coach. They don't say I like you. They don't say I miss you. Obviously, I show the love right back. Unsolicited, they look me in the eyes and they say, I love you, coach. And there's a moment that's between me and them. And I know when they say they love me, they love that. They love what? They love what this meant to them. But somewhere in their heart, they feel I had a contribution to them that was special. And as long as that happens, I'm good. As long as my health holds out. They want an old timer. I'm 70 years old now. I don't know why they want me back, but that's, to me, of all of what we're just talking about, it's that look in the eye. It's the look in the eye when we're in trouble. It's getting that one-to-one contact and getting that, I got you, coach. I got you. No talk, no description, no chartboard, just, I got this, coach.
Does it mean more now at 70 than it did at 50?
You know, it's different.
How?
At 50, I was still an athlete. I mean, coaching lacrosse became, for me, the continuation of my athletic career. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that I could get back engaged in interscholastic varsity activity, standing on the sidelines at Memorial Field at East Grand Rapids, coaching? I had no idea, but so I think in the 50s, it was more about getting the job done.
Okay.
Every year, state championship, every year. We didn't win them, but every year we got there except a couple times. Now it's about the kids. It's about enabling them to have that journey. It's about enabling them to take away from that experience whatever they take away, the camaraderie, the relationship with their coaches, the success as an individual, the success as a team, the ability to move on to the next level if that's what gets them, the comfort. I mean, we've had so many great lacrosse players that migrate to Michigan State, Michigan, for the academic experience. But they're free to do that in their own minds now because they played on a state championship team. I mean, they were a jock. They can go to Michigan and be in the stands. They don't. And we've got others that are crazy like me, and they're at Division III, Kenyon. They're all over, the Midwest. We've got an All-American, Division III All-American at Amherst. Played in the finals last year, NCAA finals. Lost. Ends up as a field All-American at the NCAA Division III level. Played for East Grand Rapids.
Is it the reason it's about the process and about the kids now? Is it maybe more comfortable because you understand what it is you're doing more, and it just expands the knowledge of what you expect for yourself?
I think, look, the MHSAA is changing. The competition is dynamic. Schools come up, some of them stay for a while, some of them don't. Some of the more noteworthy schools are coming back sometime. Cranbrook's coming back, Country Day's coming back. St. Mary's is always competitive for us. Central's graduated now. They're 2-year dynasty, but they're going to be good. They're going to be strong again. We've got Forest Hills Eastern now. I mean, think about it. We had 3 teams from Grand Rapids as semifinalists last year in Division II. So it's always, I don't sleep much. You can say, am I more comfortable? I'm more confident that if we do what we want to do and our stats manifest that we're doing them reasonably correct, we can predict some success. So in that regard, knowing that the analytics tell the story usually makes me feel better. It also scares the crap out of me like it did last year. But I'm still in it for the bling. I'm still in it for the, I like the championships. I kid my guys, if the competitive spirit in me, I think, is still alive and well. Take nothing for granted, nervous as hell, push my coaches, create expectations. If the kids answer those, that's fine. If they don't want to answer them, that's okay too.
I'm 5 years behind you at 65, and I now understand Joe Paterno. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
There's as much fire as there ever been, and you think at some point you wouldn't have.
Yeah, but it's, I tell the parents, I get asked all the time, how much longer are you going to do this? And God, willing, I don't really know. But I'll tell you, when I lose the connection with those kids, with the end of the season, I get thanks for a great year, coach. I don't get the, I love you, coach, and I give it back and don't get a response. Then it'll be time. That more than anything will tell me, what, this career has run its course.
The extraordinary part of these interviews is finding out things you don't know, which is kind of why we're conducting these interviews. And I'm not sure everybody knows who you are, because I've learned some things. I've known you for a while, and I've learned some things in this interview that are amazing and a lot softer than I would ever given you credit for before we had a chance to talk for an hour. And then, like I said, we've known each other for a while. So I think that's something that I hope people get from this, because I get now why you guys are successful. And it's more than just the analytics. It's you, it's the way you process, and it's been really fun having that part of the conversation. I'm not sure we know I'm sure your close friends know, but I'm not sure everybody knows Rick Deblasio like they should.
Well, I try to, I realized that I've been fortunate. I was the president of the MSLA before the MHSA took over. So I got to know a lot of guys. I was probably one of the first West Michigan guys to be as active, who was actually willing to drive to Detroit for all those meetings.
Yep.
And I know that I can come across with a pretty tough veneer. I'm pretty determined in my beliefs, especially when it comes to what's best for Michigan lacrosse and what's best for the aggregate group of kids that we're responsible for. And I'm very blessed to now have had the opportunity not only to coach against, but to know and work with so many wonderful people over the years. you and I have developed a really fine relationship, Jim Carl, and many, many others. But at the end of the day, and I think for all of us, especially volunteer coaches who we're not teachers, I'm not on a contract to East Grand Rapids to teach and coach. It's all about the kid. If I had anything advice for young kids, be confident in what you need to achieve. Take a chance to figure out how those kids. Every now and then I'll have a young coach join me that comes from a very astute college background, and it's kind of a non-starter for me when a coach starts explaining what's not going right by this is the way college guys do it, or if you want to play college lacrosse, you're going to have to develop this ability to shoot or run or dodge, whatever. And I always remind them privately, hey, I don't give a damn about what they need to do to succeed in college. I'm trusting that they'll succeed as they grow. We need to teach them what they can do in this environment to be successful executing our strategy. And if everything we need to do requires a Division III or Division II, starter level player, and we play teams that have a lot of those guys. We have some. We don't have a lot. We're never going to be successful. And that runs against everything I believed in and done all my life. So, yeah, tone it down a little bit. Understand this is a high school junior. This is not a college freshman or senior. Let's focus on how we can do what you want them. They can do what you want them to do, not necessarily the way you would do it because of your.
I want to thank you for the time. I think this has been a really terrific interview.
Well, good. Appreciate all you guys do, you especially.
We learn when we learn things that we didn't know. That's always a great interview, right? I think that's
for sure.
So
Well, I appreciate your interest and taking the time
for all your efforts and all the things you do. Good time, and again, thanks for all that you do for.
Yeah. All right, Greg. Good. Looking forward to seeing you this spring.
Thanks.